Hello, welcome to the Cultural Curriculum Chat. I'm your host, Jeppa Edmonds, and in the guest chair we have today Dr. Deonna Smith. Dr. Deonna Smith is a former teacher and school leader and educational justice advocate. With over a decade of experience, Deonna has worked with students and teachers in grades K through 12, and even in the higher education setting. As a student, teacher, DEI practitioner, and administrator, Deonna saw firsthand how inequitable our schools could be. But she also saw the potential for schools to be spaces of liberation and joy. Deonna's passion for connecting theory with practice led her to pursue and complete her doctoral degree in education and social justice. In the guest chair, we have Dr. Deonna Smith. Dr. Deonna, I am so excited that you're here today. I gave our listeners your background in being raised in your work, especially in social justice. So could you just build up your story of what is your story? How did you grow up and discover this passion of anti-racist work in the education system?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you first so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today. I guess we can go back to my experience as a student, going all the way back. I am from Spokane, Washington. So it is a very homogenous, very white area of Washington. So I grew up as the only student of color at my elementary school and almost always the only student of color, and especially the only Black person in like my advanced classes or honors classes and that kind of thing. So my experience of education was very much that I had to learn how to code switch from an early age. I had to learn how to navigate a system that was just not designed for a student like myself. I also was neurodivergent. I was undiagnosed at the time as a student, but I had different hurdles to overcome in my educational experience. And I had two very wonderful parents that did not necessarily know how to navigate that either, because they were working, busy, trying to provide for us. So they didn't have a lot of time to devote to giving us the ins and outs of how to navigate that system. So a lot of it, I had to learn maybe trial by fire on my own. But what I experienced and what I knew was that I had to really leave my culture at the door, that I had to leave a lot about who I was at the door to be successful, to be, a straight A student, to get those scholarships. I had to leave in some ways my Blackness at the door and figure out how to navigate this very white school system that was set up to accommodate specifically white neurotypical students. And as I experienced that, I became more and more passionate about paving the way, but also making sure that other people could, follow the path that I forged, and wanting to be the teacher that I never had. I never actually had a Black teacher. And so as I started thinking about what I wanted to do with my life post-graduating, I wanted to be the Black teacher for students. I wanted to see them in their fullness and how wonderful they are. So that's really what started my journey in education. And then because of my own personal experience, I knew from day one that anti-racism, cultural responsiveness was going to be something that was embedded in my pedagogy from the beginning. So that's what really motivated me to learn more, because I didn't get a lot of that in my teacher ed program. So I knew that I was going to have to find the resources one way or another, because it was important to me. So I started to build my skill set that way as well.
Do you have an example of that for our educator listeners that can kind of get their head wrapped around what am I missing?
An example of how systemic racism works in education.
Well, yeah, let's go to the very foundation.
Or,
however you think is best. Yes.
Yeah, I think for a lot of teachers, what we don't necessarily see is that the normative, I'm using air quotes, the normative standard way is not designed for students of color, students who don't speak English at home, neurodivergent students. And so when we think of the standard student, that's really what we're taught to accommodate. And that doesn't work for it. It never worked for all of our students, but now we're at the point where it doesn't even work for most of our students. And so it's so important that we recognize that the normative, atypical student that our classes are designed to teach us how to interact with, a lot of times that's not the actual student that we're interacting with when we get into the classroom setting. And so for me, one challenge that I consistently had is, curriculum for me was always a lens into another culture. It was always like looking at someone else's experience. I never had an opportunity of the curriculum being a mirror. I didn't read stories about people that were like me. I read stories about other experiences in it. So I was always from the outside looking in. When I would be in social studies, I didn't learn about Blackness as it exists as itself, as this beautiful, deep culture. I only learned about Blackness as it pertains to whiteness, which was slavery and civil rights. I never got any other investment. I never learned about other ways of being and understanding what it means to be a Black woman, or even what understanding about other cultures that wasn't focused on white American culture. So my experience as a student was very much oriented towards an experience that I didn't have firsthand, and that's okay. But I think for a lot of teachers, they don't even recognize how much we're leaving out of the average experience.
And we're going to talk about your book in a second, but I love how you wrote in your book in thinking about, and I quote, "Do we see our students in their full humanity?" And just like you were saying, that mirror, we're missing that mirror. And these are the only two pillars we're going to focus when we're talking about Blackness. Everything else doesn't exist. And I can totally see what you were saying of leaving our Blackness and our other cultures at the door, leaving our ways that we learn at the door in order to get what we can get in the day-to-day school. And I think that is really important. A lot of us educators have that fear of letting go of that, that scope and sequence, because we've already done it. Another thing too that I really want you to kind of add up is so many of us, especially in this day and age, talking about, I just want the strategies, Jeb. Just tell me what I gotta do and da-da-da-da-da. And I love how you talk about mindset. Just give us a little taste about your theories about mindset in doing this work.
I'll give you an example. A lot of times, teachers will talk about, how do I get my kids to stop talking? I can give you a strategy for helping the kids quiet down, or one mic or one voice or whatever it is. But I also want to talk about, what is your mindset about who is talking in class and who is doing the learning, and should kids be able to talk, and what is a discussion, and what does it mean to have a classroom where we're not just going back and forth with the teacher, but we're actually learning collaboratively. Because I think a lot of times that's at the bottom, because we as teachers are looking for ways to get kids to conform to rules and expectations. But sometimes our mindset is not there to say, does this rule or expectation even make sense? Right? Because I don't want to tell you how to get your kids to stop talking if I go to your classroom and lo and behold, the kids are talking because they never get to talk. Because they're just in direct instruction. They just sit there and listen, and then they're trying to talk any way that they can, and we're trying to squash that out. So that's one example of a strategy is good, but we have to talk about the mindsets. And a lot of teachers don't realize that they have internalized a deficit mindset about our students. And what that means is we're seeing our students as lacking. And if you engage with social media at all, you will see this over and over again. Our mindset is so focused on what the kids are lacking, what they can't do, that we're missing, okay, maybe our system isn't setting them up for success. And we have to address our mindsets and our systems. So we're talking about kids have a really short attention span. Okay, that might be true. But also, do you like to be talked at for 10, 15 minutes at a time when you have to sit perfectly still? Because I don't. So two things can be true. Maybe our mindset about how we run our classroom and what our expectations are needs to be unpacked. And we need to get to the root of that deficit. And also we need to strategies for supporting our kids in classrooms so that they can do well. So I think people are giving it kind of an either or, but it's really a both and.
Yes, a both and. I love that. I feel like with us as educators, they feel like they need to sacrifice one in order to gain the other. And I love that when you say they both need to work collaboratively. And as I do, when I'm thinking, especially how I process, I need to talk it out. I need to practice talking it out. And I was that kid that talked too much in class, but it wasn't like as being disruptive, but I'm just trying to gather my thoughts and thinking of how we were as young people too in that classroom.
Right.
But we also have to sit back and go, wow, what worked for me doesn't work for everyone. And like I said, we need to start making that shift in order to be more equitable for all of us. And you're right with that. I know I'm going all over the place, but that deficit mindset, so many of us still don't have that asset mindset, with our kids that are learning it different ways.
Absolutely. I mean, and yeah, it's what I hope people understand is that I'm coming from a place of support. And I think for so long, for some reason, all of this work kind of got this bad rap that it was like one more thing to do. And so I've been at PDs where I come in and they're like, I have to grade and I have to do this. I can't also be culturally responsive. And my response is always like, y'all, this is going to help you. Like, you are going to be less frustrated. This isn't just one other thing. This is a pedagogy. It's a way of life. It's a way of being that will not only sustain you, but sustain your students. And it's coming from my experience. And I talk about this in the book as well. There's a lot of these bad things that I'm talking about that I have done. And some of my students are on my social media. So from time to time, you'll see them in the comments be like, yeah, Miss Smith used to be too strict, da, 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 da. And that's the truth. Like, I have made a lot of these mistakes. So it's not coming from a place of, trying to shame anyone. It's saying, like, be okay with being wrong about something. Like, I was wrong about the way that I did some things when I first started teaching. And I'll probably be wrong about things that I keep doing today. But I try to continue to embody that asset-based approach so that I can keep learning and getting better. And when you engage with it that way, when it's something like exciting, when it's something interesting, when you think of yourself as a lifelong learner, it's really sustainable. But if you keep thinking about it as one more thing to do or something that the district says I have to do, it's never going to feel good. So it's about changing our mindset about this work in and of itself as well.
Yes. And I love how you even said in your book too, how it's so interconnected. It is not just one other thing. We're already establishing our classroom community from the jump. Like we're constantly making sure that kids can feel that they belong in that space. It's just fine tuning some of those things. Right. Is important for us educators to remind ourselves, and our love of teaching our future is so important. So, what I also would love for you to just share more about your book. I'm such a fan. As soon as you dropped it, everyone, Deonna's book is called Rooted in Joy, Creating a Classroom Culture of Equity, Belonging, and Care. What I love about your book, before you share it, it's so practical. You can dog ear, go back to it. I really highly recommend them using it in their professional learning communities. And in your chapters are, like I said, easily digestible with pedagogy as well as practice and your own self-reflective, experiences. So yeah, tell us more.
Yeah. The book was it was really a love letter to teachers, to my students, to the learning that I've done, because, I really wanted to marry the pedagogy, the frameworks, because I got my doctorate in education, right? And I read all of these amazing scholars who had all these things to say. But then at the same time, I was translating it into social media. So I'm trying to take, you can't see, but I have like hundreds of books behind me. That's my setup in my room. So I'm trying to take all of this, but turn it into something that can be distilled on social media and shared, because the reality is a lot of teachers won't have the opportunity like I did to get their doctorate or to learn more and go deeper at the same time. So I was in that mind of how can I make this accessible? How can I break this down and support folks? And then it was also really important to me for my former students to understand that I made mistakes as an early career teacher, and some things that I would still do, some things I wouldn't do. And I wanted them to see that I was reflective about it. I'm a learner. So my former students that had me first year teaching, I'm able to go back and see, this is what I did right. This is what I would have done differently. And so to kind of honor, the fact that my students were learning along with me. I mean, when you're a first couple year teacher, especially because I was like 21 years old, like we were all learning together. We were children. So I really wanted them to be honored in that way. And then all of my colleagues, I had some amazing colleagues that I learned from that I still talk to this day that helped me shape what it looks like to put this stuff in practice. And then I tried to marry that with all of the research that I was doing. And it was so important for me to have something that teachers can reference, can look back on, because when I first started teaching, I don't want to name drop and get in trouble, but there was a couple books that were recommended to me as like the field guides, right? Like these are the things that you look back and you reference, but none of them were about working, supporting, uplifting kids of color. It was very much training teachers to have classrooms about conformity and control and not about learning and community. And so I wanted my book to kind of disrupt that a little bit, because I was like, I'm seeing all of these teachers, the first gift that they get out of their teaching credentialing programs is like, no shade, teach like a champion. And to me, that a lot of those strategies don't resonate with what I would call a community that's about learning over control. So yeah. I wanted to add something to the work, and I'm working on book 2 already. So I've been on book 2, but I want to continue to add to that so that teachers have something and can really feel seen. Like, for those teachers who are out there who feel like they're alone, maybe they're the only person in their building that cares about this stuff. Maybe they're like they're not getting the grade level lead job because they asked the tough questions. I just wanted them to feel like really seen and like somebody was there walking with them. So this book was all about kind of trying to create that. And it's been a wild ride. Like, somebody just told me that they got my book for Christmas, and it brought tears to my eyes, because it's like, this is so crazy that people this is a gift to people. So it's been the most rewarding thing probably I've ever done for sure.
And I cannot wait, Deonna, for your next one and the more to come after that. And I want you to kind of talk to us too with your book is, how are ways that educators, when they read your book, what do they need to really keep in mind? We talked about mindset and the pedagogy. Is there another nugget you want them to kind of keep in mind while they're reading your book?
Yeah, I think it's so important what you just said, which is that, so as a teacher, you feel a lack of autonomy, right? You feel like the district comes in, the principal comes in. And I hear this all the time from teachers that say, I'm afraid to do what you said because I'm worried that my principal will come in and have an observation and I'm not going to be doing it the way that they want, right? And I think your classroom is your ecosystem. You are building your own little community, and whatever the terms and ways of being that y'all agree on in that classroom is the way that it is in that classroom. And so I want teachers to not to minimize the very real challenges that come along with being observed and being supervised and all of that. But y'all, we have a lot more power than we realize. You are shaping these little minds, and what you say in that room, to them, it really goes. And so I highly recommend for teachers to lean into that and to freedom dream what it means to create a classroom where we do something different. So, if the school culture is toxic, what if it's not? What if it's not inside your classroom? And so I want to invite people to live in that spirit of why not, of saying, how are we going to do this? Not we can't do this, but strategizing and saying okay, technically we're not supposed to, but how can we be creative and get around that? Because the second you ask, how can we do that? Your creativity turns on. If you say you can't do something, your creativity is off. You're not thinking, right? Because you've just given up. But if you say, how can I subvert? How can I, finesse? How can I wheedle around that? That kind of energy is what I want teachers to bring into it. Because I know there's going to be folks that read this and think, I am in Florida. I am not supposed to be talking about any of this stuff right now. And I'm not trying to get y'all fired, but there are always ways to circumvent, subvert, and finesse. So go into it with that spirit for sure.
Oh, I love this, Deonna. And before we wrap up, one more question I have for you before you share where we can find you. Can you give us just a quick tip on how to get the ball moving in your ecosystem? We're already over halfway over of our school year. Is there something teachers can do to kind of continue that sustainability?
Yeah. So one thing that I see a lot for teachers, especially when things start to go south or when they have challenges, is we think that we need to like circle the wagons and be even stricter. Like we think we need to crack down. And it's this very really it comes from the carcerality of education. But in our minds, we think, the kids are getting out of control, so I got to tighten it up a little bit. And what I invite you to do is instead to lean in and double down on community. And at first it might seem a little scary because you're thinking like, well, wait, if I don't crack down, they're going to go cray cray. It's going to be out of control. But when kids feel embraced and part of a community, they have a invested interest in maintaining that community. And so we have to give them a little bit more credit. So if you're seeing a lot of big behaviors and kids really like going, losing it, or you feel like you're losing it in the middle of the year, instead of cracking down, think about the antecedents, think about what might be underneath, and then double down on those community builders. Double down on like, this is our space. And it can be scary, like I said, because you want to there's like a knee-jerk reaction to when things are going badly to try to regain control. But I invite you to A, sit with why you feel such a deep need to control. And then B, think about how you can really double down on community. And it takes time, but you will start to see the seeds sprout because we're sowing seeds. Nothing is transforming overnight. Even punishments don't transform overnight, even though that might seem quicker. Community is a better way to humanize our students and really create that robust, healthy classroom ecosystem. So that is my tidbit. When things start to feel a little out of control, don't double down on control, double down on community.
So where can we find everything Deonna Smith, and where can we get your book, my dear?
Yeah. So definitely pick up Read and Enjoy. If this conversation is interesting to you, it is available at Target, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to support a Black-owned business, it's at Mahogany Books, and they do ship nationwide. So check that out. And you can find more information just about me and what I do. I do this work with schools, districts, and teachers. So find more info at DeonnaSmithConsulting.com. And of course, please follow me over on Instagram, where we talk. We have these conversations daily. So I try to do so many free tips, so much free content for people, because I know that there's so many teachers that want to do it. They just need the tools. So I try to provide that as much as possible over on my Instagram, which is just my name at Deonna Smith. And I'd love to connect with you over there.
Yeah, you're going to love her channel. You're going to love this book. She's got wonderful prompts, listeners, for just how to do your own reflective practice. Because as educators, we're always going to be lifelong learners and always reflecting everything. Yep. I've been your fan for a long time on Instagram. Oh, Deonna, thank you, everyone. I will have Deonna's contact information in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Cultural Curriculum Chat. I will see you here next time. Bye-bye.